the wrong bit. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar called Inclusion, not just diversity. I'm joined today by my lovely panellists and guests. Welcome. Before we introduce the people, I just want to go through some housekeeping. Oh, that's a bit wrong, sorry. Forgive the absent picture there. So we would like to make this event as interactive as we can as a webinar. So we will do Q&A at the end. Please do submit your questions throughout. You can use the Q&A function in the bar below, and you can submit your questions at any time. Please do utilise the chat function as an alternative to speaking, and to comment and to answer questions. Please be mindful not to be too conversational, as that might redirect focus from our panellists. And please do feel free to leave at any point. If you feel the need for mental health support, please do click in the email that I sent you prior to this. There's a link in that email to signpost you to mental health support in there. Without any more further ado, Roland, say hello. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. I'm Roland Chesters. I am a disability trainer. I live with HIV and AIDS, and I'm an author of Ripples from the Edge of Life. I think that's enough for the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. Esi?
Hello everyone, my name is Esi Hardy. I am a disability inclusion expert and speaker. I run Celebrating Disability and I deliver training talks and general consultancy to businesses. And I'm also a disabled person.
Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, morning everyone. My name's Katie Neeves and I've been a photographer and filmmaker for the last 33 years. But 2.5 years ago, I admitted to myself and I came out very publicly as being a transgender woman after living for 48 years as a man. So I now have a new business called Call to Be Trans. So I'm a trans ambassador, so I do trans awareness training, public speaking and media appearances, just to reach out to other trans people to let them know that it's okay to be trans, but then also to educate the general public and show them that trans people are just ordinary people who want to be safe, loved and happy, just like everyone else.
Thank you, Katie. Jason?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jason Grant. I kind of brand myself as a lived experience consultant. So I specialise in mental health, but more focused on psychosis. I do a lot of work with the NHS, with some charities and within academia as well. So nice to see you all.
Fantastic. Great. So let's kick off with the first question, huh? So, Esi, let's start with you. What does inclusion mean to you, Esi?
You know what, that's a good question. I was thinking, oh no, please don't come to me bad, but great, I will. So what does inclusion mean to me? So from a personal point of view, it means feeling included. It's not about the doing, it's about the feeling. So it's not about the actions of other people, it's about the feelings that I have. And obviously those feelings come from the actions that people have taken. But then if they don't have the right attitude to back up those actions, then it doesn't matter. So I always say to people, as a disabled person, I'd rather sit outside a restaurant than go into a restaurant and not feel as though I'm welcome and valued as a customer.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Jason, what's inclusion mean to you?
Yeah, I think for me, inclusion is all about just feeling part of, like, so feeling that you belong and your presence is welcomed. I have to be honest to say, so I think in the majority of my life, I am felt very included in all aspects of my life. But I feel once I disclose mental health, then I then start seeing a slight shift in people's perceptions. So sometimes it's easier for me to not disclose my mental health stuff and to just kind of like, disappear like everyone else. But fundamentally, it's about just feeling like you belong and being part of, really.
Thank you, Jason. And Katie, how about you? Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're Roland, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Me. No, Katie, you go
Sorry.
first.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go first.
I didn't mean to do that.
Do we have a fight about it?
That's all
I'm a
right.
pacifist.
As long as it's an inclusive fight.
Please, of course. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, obviously on a broader scale, inclusion is about everybody having an equal opportunity and regardless of what they look or sound like or whatever condition that they may have. But on a personal level, it's just things like being misgendered on the phone, that sort of thing. So I would like people to accept it because obviously people are seeing me now. So you're getting the whole picture, but obviously on the phone, I'm very aware that I've still got quite a deep voice. And so on the phone, I get misgendered every day. Whereas, when I'm out and about in real life, people see me, I very rarely get misgendered. So when I tell them that my name is Katie Neeves and it's Miss and whatever, I want them just to accept it. I don't want them just to be, oh, can you spell that? Can you, really? Is that, you don't sound like a Katie and all that. So those specific things. And it's even when people make an announcement and they just say ladies and gentlemen. Now that's fine for me because I identify as a woman and that's absolutely fine, but I've got lots of non-binary friends and they don't fit in either of those. So there is no need to make an announcement that say ladies and gentlemen. It's fine just to say hello everyone. So that's what inclusion means to me.
Yeah, fantastic. And Roland? Hi.
Last but not least,
Of course.
for me, it's about being able to be fully authentic. We all wear different hats at different times. We have different personas. But for me, it's being allowed, enabled to bring your full self to the table without fear of any kind of judgment. That, for me, is what inclusivity is about.
I think taking from what you've brought up there, like, it's a feeling. It's a feeling where you can feel content and just be unencumbered by people's perception of you or your perception of yourself. Even I think that's a big one. And to truly be able to participate and live life like we want to. I think that's what inclusion means to me. I mean, to wrap up on that question.
Can I, before you do wrap up on that question, can I just follow on from your point and also Roland's point that it's, for me, I think I've lost my trail of thought. But for me, it's about that safety. It's about that psychological safety. So from what Roland was saying and what you were saying about being able to walk in and be who you are, you have to feel secure enough to be who you are. So, for example, people have asked me a lot recently, in the light of Black Lives Matter, to talk on kind of the Black movement and issues around Black people. And I say, yeah, that's absolutely fine, but that's not my expertise. And there's no way that there's nowhere on my website or there's nowhere on my social media that I advertise that I'm expert in that. So people are just looking at me and making assumptions. And that, in some circumstance, makes me feel really insecure because they want me to be a certain thing where I feel, obviously, I am a mixed race person and I'm happy to talk about my personal experience, but I'm not happy to talk about that professionally. And it makes me feel insecure that I'm not giving people what they expect, which goes back to that feeling of safety and psychological safety. So I think, again, inclusion for me is about feeling safe to be who you want to be as well and who you are.
I fully endorse that, Esi. I was recently asked to deliver a workshop about age. It's like, Why?
Excuse me.
Why me? What are you trying to imply by this? So yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
I think that the safety element in there is really interesting, and given the recent like uprising of Black Lives Matter, in it's driven people to what we were talking about on Monday, Esi, about being heard and listened to and valued and respected, and it's these simple what I can only see as simple things to expect of people that not everyone gets, and to me that it's backwards, and it doesn't make sense in my mind to not respect and value people and hear what people have to say, and it doesn't add up in my mind how people cannot be like that, and it's baffling to me. Moving on, so I got a Katie here. When can you identify a time when you felt included?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I'm very lucky. I feel included most of the time, to be honest. But I think a lot of it is down to looks and how I present, and I know that I'm lucky from that point of view. And so many people judge people just by their looks, and I'm very lucky that I already got quite a feminine face anyway, so I haven't felt the need to have any facial feminization surgery, for instance. Whereas a lot of my trans women friends, they do feel the need to, and they might be 6 foot, they might be built like rugby players, for instance, but they feel just as feminine as I do, and so I know that I am very, very lucky from that point of view. So I very rarely get problems like that, and so I do feel included in that. But I think also it's down to the fact that I'm self-employed, and the fact that the way that I've approached it as I have, and I came out very publicly and very openly and brought people along on the journey with me. But not all trans people feel strong enough to be able to do that. And so some of them, most of them actually just want to just sort of keep their heads down and just sort of, go under the radar. But I was in a job where I was already reasonably high profile anyway, so I just didn't have that option open to me. So I just had to go at it, all guns blazing. Yeah, I am lucky, but I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm not representative of most trans people. Yeah, so yeah.
Thank you. Esi, what about you? Can
I just echo Katie's kind of what Katie said there? I think also that the majority, if we think about the amount of disabled people in the UK, the majority of disabled people do not want to talk about their disability. They do not want to tell people that they're disabled because of lots of reasons, of that fear of repercussion, but also because they don't identify as disabled themselves. And that might be because of the stigma that surrounds disability, them thinking, oh, I'm not like that, I'm not one of them, and all of that bias that we see on TV and, Little Britain. I know it's a long time ago, but I always go back to, the, can't remember the character's name, but we all know the one that we're talking about, Andy, I think he's called, where he gets out of his wheelchair every time his care worker's not looking. And I think all of that makes the majority of disabled people feel as though, I don't want to identify as that, I don't want that to be my life. So I think that stops a lot of disabled people from feeling included, because they know that there's ways that they need the support that they need to access something, well, no matter what that thing is, but they can't ask for that support because they're not used to asking for that support, because they don't want to highlight the fact that they need something different to everybody else. And I myself, early on in life, was kind of like that. I really wanted to stay away from this persona of being around disabled people. I quite often tell the story of when I met my now best friend, who is also physically disabled. I did everything I can, even almost landed myself in a canal to avoid her, because I didn't want to be around disabled people because of the perceptions that I had at the time. I will say that I was 18, and I am no longer 18, I know I look it, of disability. So that it stopped me from feeling included in lots of things. And for me, inclusion came when I accepted, and not just accepted who I was, but celebrated who I was really, and saw the benefits in being a disabled person, and realized that, you know, the things that were stopping me being included were not my problem. They were external problems, and they didn't belong to me. And that alone made me feel more included in society.
And I can relate, definitely. And I think being in a world where disability isn't represented enough, and it isn't positively represented enough, it's a very difficult thing to, and I still go back and forth with it, you know, even now, being, you know, an inclusion consultant myself, but it's such a difficult thing to do, isn't it? And Jason, that's on to you. Can you identify a time when you felt?
I think for me, as I said on the first answer, I've kind of, again, luckily a bit like Katie, that I generally feel included in most aspects. But I was thinking about how to answer this question when Esi was talking, and actually I would say, and I don't know if it's right to say this, but it feels like, you know, under the pandemic that we're living in, it's starting to feel like this inclusion thing is becoming more stark, actually. So I think pre-pandemic, I used to go to loads of events, you know, loads of lectures. I used to be a keen dancer. So I had loads of like activities, social activity, where I felt included and part of. But obviously all of that social activity doesn't exist anymore. So everything's being done virtually. And I think what's slowly happening is, because people are starting to realize that we're going to have to face these challenges for another 6 months or so, it feels like people are starting to retreat. And actually, I have to make more of an effort to reach out to people, just to say, you know what, how are you? You know, and to check. And I'm conscious that I do that because it makes me feel good. Right? So there's a reason why I'm doing this, but the reality is not that many people reach out to me and say, Jason, how are you? And so I just know that it's that thing around, we're all kind of, you know, kind of shrinking our social worlds in a way that that hasn't existed in my lifetime. So, I suppose my biggest concern is that we don't start to not include people who are different, right? And our small social worlds just become, you know, a depiction of ourselves, basically, so to speak. So I'm slightly concerned, but I do feel, yeah, in the majority of cases, I am fully included. But there is one example, but I think you're going to touch on when we're not included. I do have a negative example, but yeah, for the most part, it's always good.
Thank you. I mean, and just to reference that point about the current climate and the thinking social scene, like, you know, early on in the pandemic, we recognised that was a potential concern and issue, and I've actually set up a support group for everyone. If everyone wants to come along or share that information with others, it's called Let's Stay Connected, and it's Wednesday the 12th, and that is a portal for those to be asked how they are and to be valued and listened to and hopefully included, and especially those who are feeling isolated or alone. So please do reach out if you like to, and please join our virtual support group. We always welcome new people, so please you're all welcome there. And Roland, sorry, we'll come to you last again. But can you share a time when you felt included, please?
Well, I was reflecting on this, and the word community came to mind. So, as a gay man, potentially I'm part of the gay community. As a person with disabilities, I'm part of the disability community. As somebody living with HIV, I'm part of the HIV community. But that concept, that notion of community, I think only exists for people who aren't part of that community, because that concept of community doesn't actually exist, I don't think. If you look at the disabled community, people with different disabilities and even people with the same disability, their experience of that disability can be radically different. Their approach to managing their disability can be very different. The gay community is wide. The HIV community is wonderful, but again, it covers such a wide range of different people. I think labeling people as part of a community is actually disadvantaging them. It removes the uniqueness, the individuality of that person. My example of when I felt inclusive, I'm creative, and I have always dreamed of making hats, ladies' hats. So I wanted to join a one-day workshop delivered by a well-known milliner in London. And I phoned up to join the workshop, and the lady who answered the phone was taking down my details, and she said, "So who is it? Can I take the name of the person that's coming to the workshop?" I said, yes, it's me. It's Roland Chesters. And a bit like Katie, the woman at the other end of the phone, there was a slight pause, and she said, "Do you know this is for making hats?" And I said, yes, absolutely. That's why I'm signing up for it. And he said, "Well, mostly they're making hats for ladies." I said, that's fine. Great, good. And we will be making ladies' hats on the day of the workshop. Great, that's what I want to do. Sign me up. Which she did eventually with a degree of reluctance. When I turned up on the day, there was me and a dozen fabulous ladies who welcomed me with open arms and were actually, I think, more excited to have a man in the group than had there not been a man. And at the end of the workshop, there's a group photo with us all wearing the hats that we had made. I look lovely with a fascinator, I have to say. It was splendid. I felt fully included after that initial reluctance on behalf of the person who was taking the registrations.
I mean, that's a brilliant example, and actually a very interesting example of how an organisation or a person leading a workshop or an event can get it so wrong.
In actual, I think it was the person who was taking registrations, a woman who's leading the workshop, the milliner herself, was absolutely fine with it. And when I had discussion with her, we agreed that the majority of famous milliners are actually all men. So, you know, duh.
But when I would say that it would be her responsibility to
yes, absolutely,
or you know, advise the registration to be aware of that and actually be mindful of people who from all you know.
But isn't that the same with many organizations, that there are people who potentially are in charge in some kind of way who do get it, but they don't necessarily pass that message on or that spirit of inclusivity down to through the ranks?
Definitely, and I think that not to plug my own resources at all. I've actually created an online event inclusion guide. So if anyone wants to know how to go about running an inclusive online event, please do. It's on my website, but also I can send it to you if you like that. And I just put out a good takeaway. Thank you, Roland. Cool. Have we heard from on that one from everyone now? I think we have. Yeah. So now I'd like to hear about time when you haven't felt interviewing for excluding that, and perhaps what could have been, what you've identified could have been done better by other people to mitigate those things. I'm going to go to Jason first for this one.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I do have a really bad example, and it's mainly around work, actually. So, and obviously we have this dilemma. So, you know, we have these jobs and we have work, so, and we have to be the most productive and the most efficient to actually, you know, achieve targets and get the job done. And I think it's we're having to really almost like re-evaluate what work means and what meaningful work means for people that live with difference. Is how I put it. So basically what happened was, and this is a few years ago, I'm not going to mention names because obviously it's good to just protect people, but I got a job for a charity, and usually when you work in the charitable sector, people are usually quite open-minded, quite, you know, liberal, I suppose, quite inclusive and quite embracing of difference. And when I was working for this charity, I, you know, got through the interview, got through the selection process, you know, was on my, went through induction, was on my probation period. And I thought I was with a really great organisation. Everyone's been very open about loads of different things, loads of different. So I thought, great. So I said, I'll be open about mental health. And once I started being open about that situation, it was almost like, well, we don't know what to do here. And it became very, very apparent that they wanted to get me out of the organisation straight away, right? And I think for me, that was a real kind of shock to the system, because I had only just kind of, you know, was in recovery from my mental health. So I'm trying to come to terms with living with these experiences. Work, so I'm trying to be productive, right? You know, you get into a job and then they kind of just let you go just like that. And it felt really, like it was a real shock to the system. But luckily, what I would say and how it can be improved is that the next job I went into, I mean, I was obviously more open about my mental health. From that experience, I said, you know what, on the interview, I've got to be upfront about what I'm dealing with, just so that they're aware of it. I got accepted to that job. And on my first day, my manager sat down with me and they did, it's called a workplace adjustment passport. But I think a lot of disabled people will be familiar with that concept. It's where your manager basically outlines, you know, what is your experience? How does it affect you? What support you need? You know, what can we do if you're going into crisis? Like, really be open, but really put together a plan of action about how to kind of manage myself in the workplace. And, you know, lo and behold, I mean, that contract lasted about a couple of years, but lo and behold, I didn't have any problems. And I think if managers, my only plea would be, if any managers are on this call, right, but just have those kind of open conversations and really co-design a plan of action with people. And that will enable people to have far more better outcomes in the workplace, I would say.
Brilliant. Yeah, completely agree there, Jason. Completely. And it's the complete, to get to know someone and to co-create, the important word is co-create there. So I think that you do work with, you know, your manager on those things, and actually when you're doing that, they get to know you as well, and actually get to know your triggers, we get to know what you feel when you're down, and even sharing that information can be powerful, and it can be empowering, can't it? It can, and the fact that, you know, from day one, they were so supportive of that, I think it's brilliant. And that's a really good example of how we can all take the most simple, what we see as simple steps, but crucial steps to just understand people and make each person feel valued and heard, and so I'll stop talking now. Can we go to, let's go to Katie now. When have you felt
There's a couple of examples I want to give. One is more recent, and that's with my work, and that when I came out very publicly as being trans, you know, I didn't know what the reaction would be with my clients, and thankfully most of them have rallied behind me and supported me. But I did lose some clients, and so I felt excluded then. So that was that, and there's no way back with that. If they've got an issue with it, There's no law that protects a freelance person from from bigotry. If people have got a problem, the phone stops ringing. So that's a recent thing. But what I want to do is cast them back to before I was freelance with my photography and video, when I used to work as a staff press photographer, so on a newspaper, and the press photography used to be a very male-orientated business. It's not so much now, but well, in fact, there's not many staff photographers now. But that's a change in newspapers. That's a different story. But in terms of then, it was very male dominated business, and the photographic departments were always very boisterous. There's always a lot of banter, and I remember at the time, it was when I was still identifying as a cross-dresser. Now, I've always had something called gender dysphoria, right from age of about 3 or 4. But it was only actually when I got to 48 that I actually admitted to myself that I was transgender. But so at the time I was working on this newspaper, I was identifying as a man who needed to cross-dress. And I remember a photographer going out to photograph a story about a local cross-dresser. And I remember all the banter that was going on within the office at the time. And they were all having a right go and having a right laugh. And I thought, little did they know that they've got a cross-dresser who was actually working in that department, but I was too frightened to come out. Yeah. And so that was a time that I particularly felt excluded. So I thought that was quite a good example.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the banter is such a, for me, it's such a weird thing to kind of to enter into and be so, it's almost like blatant, being a bit over the top, isn't it? I mean, that's how I see banter. I'm not sure how you define it.
Yeah, and I think it puts the onus on the person who it's being directed to. It makes you look bad if you complain about it. Oh, it's only banter. It's only banter. Well, some banter can be hurtful.
But I mean, also like banter and behaviour and excusing me behaviour. Like, I was in a meeting, which is the way that went. I was employed by a charity, won't name names, but this charity was terrible. And the senior management team would roll their eyes, enter into boisterous, hurtful banter, and laugh it off. And I was one of the people who actually stood up to them and actually really should rethink doing those things, because we're actually hurting this person right here. And from an upstart like me back then, not even 21 yet, I think, for a person of insignificance in an organisation to not just question, but request that a change in behaviour that they're required was a bit of a shock to SMT, and I wasn't going down without a fight, so
No.
that's right for that. But I thought it needed to be done because I thought it wasn't right, and it was actually hurting people, and doing that, and especially in their workplace where we spend most of our time working, or a lot of our time working, it'll be lucky, and it can be toxic if we're not mindful of other people.
Absolutely.
Sarah, there's a note on the chat here that says banter is worse for me, as I always find it difficult to challenge when it's aimed directly at me. And I think that it's a good point, well made, that actually people that are illicit or take part in banter, they're not thinking about what the consequences are for those people. When people don't say anything, when they do say something, because I've been the victim of banter as well, and oh no, you're just being silly, stop being a snowflake, is quite often what people would say to me. But then when people don't respond, because as this person said that he doesn't feel secure to respond, then people think it's okay and they just continue. And it's not a problem because nobody said anything about it. So it's all fun and he's enjoying the joke as well, isn't he? And I think that's one of the biggest problems of banter, that it's kind of that massive sliding scale effect, either all one or all the other.
Yeah,
I think it's really important to remember that the current equality legislation in terms of inappropriate behavior is all about impact rather than intent. So even though people, it's just a bit of a joke, innit, mate? Actually, that joke is harmful, offensive, and psychologically damaging. So stop it. And I appreciate that sometimes I'm old enough and cynical enough to be able to say that to people, but some people are not so fortunate or not so able to express how hurtful or how harmful those kind of innuendos or in-jokes can be. And banter is a product of groupthink. It's a group of people who share a common set of values, a common set of humor, and don't understand that there may be people who do not share those values or that sense of humor.
And I think that, thank you, and I think that the other important thing is actually where the responsibility lies at. I mean, I think that we unfortunately, because of the confidence needed and the conviction and drive you need to override all those other social etiquette that you're trying to maintain by being part of, I don't know, part of the banter, whatever it is. It requires a very strong mentality too.
Sorry, Sarah, but I think humor is essential in the workplace. We need to be able to have a laugh and a joke with colleagues and all of that kind of stuff, but it requires a manager or a leader who recognizes when a line has been stepped over, and that manager or leader will step in and say, okay, that's enough. We've got to stop this now.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think that's somewhat easier to implement in a workplace than it is in out of the workplace, and when it does bring in matters from outside, which all of us I think are affected by. Where do we go, and how do we do that? And I think that these discussions are really important to evoke a usable kind of tactic and methods to be able to address them, to address those mindfully and not become excluded because of that, and because of your
and that's where people go to get coaching or mentoring, and obviously there's a difference between a coach and a mentor. So I think Esi, you do deliver coaching, Esi?
No, I don't.
Katie, do you coach? Jason, do you coach?
Yes, I do. I do offer that. So yeah, no problem at all.
Jason,
I'm smiling just because we're actually designing a mentoring and coaching program within the NHS. But no, I don't coach personally, but we're recognizing the value of providing mentoring and coaching.
So I do coach, and I coach individuals who become disabled later in life and are usually struggling to stay in employment or to get into employment. And a lot of that is about self-confidence and regaining the self-confidence that they had before they became disabled. And part of that confidence is about being able to talk about their disability in a way that makes them stronger and doesn't enable people to ridicule or make fun of them. And that's really important, that element of self-confidence that many people with a disability do not have, potentially because of their disability.
Totally agree, Roland. It's the same sort of thing with trans. I get a lot, because I'm sort of quite, well, I couldn't be more out if I tried, really. So yeah, I get a lot of trans people contacting me because I'm reasonably high profile in the trans world, and you know, so often they'll come to me, they'll be in a state of self-denial and whatever, and they're very nervous and all the rest of it. And just with just a little bit of coaching, and you just see their confidence grow, and they just blossom, and it's just so lovely to see. And you know, acceptance for yourself, you know, is the key to happiness. It really is.
Absolutely.
And you just grow, and then they're away. They're great. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's important to recognise, and I can testify, Roland's a very good coach. I do coaching from him.
I wasn't going to say anything, Sarah. So.
Well, I did. Wonderful things. And I think it's important to say that actually, I think that there's confidence is a complex thing, and it's not always a straight line. It often comes in troughs and ebbs, and I think that when what is notable here that I think people often forget is that people are being made vulnerable by things that aren't necessarily in their control, and when we learn to deal with, not necessarily deal with as in taking off and putting in a box, but actually lessen perhaps the emotional response, or lessen the reaction to certain things. That's where confidence can grow and is more sustainable and more robust, and I think that's really
Sarah, I agree with you, but I think that's putting the onus back on the individual again. You know, you need to be robust. You need to not worry about what this person said to you. Don't worry about that awful joke that was actually really derogative that they said in your direction. Don't worry that you literally can't get in the door. Don't worry that they're closing their back on you. It's turning it internal, which is making it more about the individual's problem, where it's an external problem. So I completely agree with you that it's helpful if somebody feels as though they can be a bit more robust, but we can't put it down to people's responsibility. This is something that if people feel confident, that they should portray out to other people to say, do you realise how you make me feel? Or go to an ally to say, I need a bit of support in this matter because I can't manage it anymore by myself.
Yeah,
So can I share my example? I'm dying to share my example of being excluded, and it's just.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Ryan. You haven't got to. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, thank you. So I was diagnosed with HIV and AIDS in 2006. My AIDS-defining illness was a brain disease which paralysed me. I was working in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office at the time. I was off work for 5 months. Sexual health records kept separate to other medical records, and my employees at Foreign Office were only told about the brain disease, not about the HIV and AIDS. But my first day back at work, I shared that information with my immediate line manager, not for pity or sympathy, but for understanding and support. And she quite rightly went off to HR, and HR almost immediately came back and said to me, you cannot share that information about HIV and AIDS with anybody else because we, your employers, will not be held responsible for how people may react or respond to that. So they gagged me. They stole my voice. At a time when my horizons had shifted, my future had changed, I needed people to know. And the mental health impact of that was disastrous, to the point where I tried to kill myself. Obviously wasn't successful in that. But that was an example of institutional exclusion.
Yeah.
They didn't have policies or procedures in place. They were completely out of their depth. I have to say that Foreign Office has changed substantially in the years since, and they are now much better equipped to manage much better that kind of situation. But this was a knee-jerk reaction. We don't know what to do, so we're going to tell you to just go and hide in the corner, keep quiet about it, don't cause any trouble, don't stir any ripples, because it's going to what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
And for me, that is, in terms of organizations, that is the biggest factor: institutional exclusion, where
Yeah.
people cannot think outside of the box.
Yeah, and that's like such a product of kind of acid historic and inaccurate history.
Well, it reflects the story that Jason shared with us.
Yeah.
You know, that particularly disabilities which are not visible tend to be more stigmatized than those which are visible.
Yeah.
And people react because they are ignorant, uneducated, uninformed. And I was very willing and able to inform and educate people, but no, the shutters came down. Don't talk about it.
I mean, quickly just to reflect on that from my perspective. I mean, I had a similar thing in my early school days. I know, Katie, you've heard this before, but I went up to my drama teacher and at a parent meeting, and I was very shy, unconfident, not very outgoing at all, but I wanted to be, and I really wanted to be more confident and to get there. And I said to my drama teacher, "Oh, I would love to do drama for GCSE," and immediately she said, "But you can't speak, Sarah." And to hear from someone who's supposed to be, a person to instill confidence and instill knowledge and be that boost, reality teachers and all that, but the ideal. To hear that from someone who had an authority over that was debilitating beyond, and it's still affecting now. And the ability to speak has played me for years, and since that day, and I know that it's an issue, but when we are faced with such a down kind of approach, how else are we supposed to react? How else are we institutionalized or not? It's a problem, and the way we express attitudes is important, and the thinking time we give to comments is crucial, especially when they have an impact and potential impact that could change someone quite deeply. I'm aware of it. It's nearly 10 to. I'm so sorry, Esi. We covered. I haven't forgotten, but have we covered you yet?
No, but it's fine. It's fine. You carry on with the next thing you're going to say.
Fantastic. So, as it is, nearly 10 to. I'd like to bring in some questions. I do apologise. I haven't been too able to follow the comment. I'm noticing that Jason and I think Esi and have been replying. I'm very sorry I haven't been. I'm just been interested in I'm very sorry. I will get back to you. Or if it's referencing particular person here, I'll happily pass that question on and see if they would like to answer it after the fact. But we have in the Q&A box, we have a question. So this is a question for. Oh,
it's a question for.
It was for me, but yeah, they just.
Oh, okay. John's here. Hi, John. I'm sorry. And yes, there will be a copy of. There will be a recording of this. Any questions you do have, please do put in the Q&A box. It's easier to see and easier to get to for me. But I didn't. Forgive me. I meant to say that beforehand. Forgive me. But as we've got 10 minutes left, are there anything you want to add to anything that's been said, Esi?
You put me right on the spot. No, I mean, I think I added as the conversation was happening. But yeah, I think, you know, what I was going to add about my kind of experience of exclusion is every time I do a panel discussion and any kind of discussion, I'm asked this question, I give a different answer. And I was just thinking about that a minute ago, the fact that why, you know, I have so many answers to that, you know, what's your feeling of exclusion? And that in itself is quite worrying, that I could pick from almost, it's like I've got a basket of, okay, close my eyes, this one today. And that in itself is quite scary, but they all have a similar theme of, you know, she can't, seeing what I can't do. So some of them are to do with the physical access, or presuming that I can't do something, and some of them are to do with the attitudinal access. I completely agree with Roland about what he was saying about hidden disabilities, that sometimes it's harder when somebody has a hidden disability because of the perceptions that it's not real. I can't see it. Well, you look fine. So what's your problem? You know, it must be okay. I have a friend who's been recently diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And we've been talking about it a lot, and she's almost at the stage where she wants to tell her employers. And I said, I think it's great that you tell your employers, but, you know, just be mindful of how you go about it, and maybe do some research about what's happened in the past, to make sure that your employer is going to support you in the right way. And I feel really bad saying that, because it shouldn't be her responsibility to make sure that the message is portrayed in the right way. But unfortunately, there is so much stigma, and there's still so much unknown and so much ignorance around hidden and physical disabilities, that people, you know, that we do have to take that on ourselves. We have to take that responsibility and that burden of making sure that we're going to be secure as a result of what we need to actually just do our job and actually do what our employers need us to do.
I think that, you know, Jason will, I hope, have something to reflect here about mental health. But I know that with mental health, it's often really not an obvious thing, and it takes a lot to approach anyone, let alone an employer, and feel comfortable enough to disclose that. And as you said before, it can be very, well, it can end avenues. And I mean, I have experience with that too, and even in an unpaid internship when I was, you know, pretty much full-time an intern, and I approached my then boss about my depression, and she's like, well, you're either here or you're not, Sarah. I was like, well, that doesn't really help me. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, you can't, we have you on to many big projects now, and you can't just take off anytime you want. I was like, I'm not asking to do that. I'm just asking to have a conversation about my depression and how it might impact my ability to work fully, and the dismissal of the importance of mental health then, and even again, another employer I approached dismissed it out of hand. Well, I don't really deal with that. Even try and place me onwards. And they said, well, you're gonna have to do it on your own. And it isn't okay. And people should have in place, proactive measures to.
I've just seen a question in the Q&A.
Brilliant.
Want me to read it out?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you.
What has been the impact of, in quotes, vulnerable during the pandemic?
Who would like to answer that? Who would like to go ahead?
Shall I start?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So as a perceived, in quotes, vulnerable person, I do not believe that I'm vulnerable. I believe that I'm at risk. Vulnerability is something completely different than being at risk. And I think that the impact from me has been every time I talk to, a service on the phone, like either, over the past couple of weeks, I've been speaking to doctors and dentists, and they're all over the phone because you can't go in. And as soon as I mention my disability, they assume that I'm isolating. And I say, well, no, I'm not isolating. I'm disabled, but I'm not in the at-risk category. It doesn't mean the same thing. But I think because there's a blanket, it's almost like, when we categorize a certain group of people, like I think somebody was saying earlier, and BAME is a really good example. Let's categorize everyone and put them in this box. And when we categorize the vulnerable people, it doesn't separate out individuals, and it doesn't separate out different needs and different abilities as well. So everybody's assuming that I'm isolated, and then they're not listening to what I'm saying, and they're not listening to actually what I have called them about. I'm not calling about the fact that I'm isolated. I'm calling about the fact that my tooth hurts, for God's sake, and I need you to sort my tooth out. And so for me, the impact of vulnerable is people stop thinking of me as an individual and start thinking of me as a group.
Yeah, the impact's been really bad actually for transgender children, actually, because a lot of trans children don't have supportive parents, and because if they're locked down and they can't get away, they can't get out, they're stuck with their unsupported parents, and their gender dysphoria gets worse and worse and worse, and it's been really, really tough for them, really tough.
And it's the same for LGBTQ plus youth as well. For me, and this isn't a political statement in any kind of way, but there was such mixed messaging about whether HIV positive people should be classified as vulnerable or not. Initially, the government list came out and the HIV positive people were included in the vulnerable list, and then the list was amended and they no longer were. But I was contacted by my GP who said, you're on the vulnerable list. I was contacted by the local authority who said, we've been notified you're on the vulnerable list. And they sent me a lovely box of goodies, once only, because I then turned around and said, actually, no. But I did isolate because I am immunocompromised. So my lovely partner went out to do the weekly shop, and each time he came back, I stood him in the garden and hosed him down, which he didn't really appreciate, but it had to be done. But the impact is I'm not a natural extrovert. So actually being isolated at home has actually been quite pleasant, I have to say. I don't think I could do it forever and ever, but for me personally, there's that degree of ambiguity about whether one should or not. So I made the choice and I made the decision. And it is about self-reliance, I suppose.
Well, thank you. And once we come to Jason for the panel, Jason's got. Can we, Jason, can you in? Oh, there you go. I'm aware it's 1 minute to 1 now, and I would love to come to you for the last just a closing remark where we're running the video. But would you like to share anything regarding?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just ended on an optimistic note. So I've really enjoyed the discussion today. It's great to see that to be in a virtual space with difference. Like I think everybody